Whether you like it or not, Hans Niemann is constantly making headlines, and recently, his chess is speaking for itself. In today's video, I will show you an extremely high-quality game between Hans and Anish Giri in their most recent match. Since then, he's already convincingly beaten Vidugov in another match and is set to play against Magnus Carlsen in September. I'll also share my perspective on the whole situation, since Hans is somebody that I used to know, and we'll try to find out together. Is Hans Niemann actually good at chess? He's not even really a villain. He's not a hero nor really a villain. He's just a misunderstood kid. I do think that he is playing good chess. Cannot deny that. Hans Niemann is playing good chess. Regardless of the beads, I do not think that he ever used them. Let's make this really clear. The whole thing came out of Eric Hansen reading a random comment from his Twitch chat. Like, that's how this all happened. So, there is no evidence that Hans has ever cheated over the board. This is a statement. This is a fact. Second piece of fact, Hans Niemann has historically cheated online. I'm not going to go through every single date and every single incident and every single time that he has done it, but it has been proven that he has cheated online. Anyways, back to current day, Hans has been more or less saying that, everybody kind of has been blacklisting him and chess.com hasn't let him play tournaments, whatnot like that. He said some pretty not nice things about a lot of people, as well as chess.com. Let's just basically say he's burned a lot of bridges. He's done some stuff. He's admitted to some of it. He's said he hasn't done some other things. There's been statistical proof that he hasn't entirely been the most honest in all of his statements about not having cheated. Whatever it is, you can take your own take from it. What I am trying to say at this current moment is that Hans Niemann is actually playing some decent chess. That's all. That's literally it. He has found a sponsor. I'm not actually exactly sure where. Maybe the editor can pull up a little picture over here of who his sponsor is. But Hans has been streaming his matches against some of the most notable players in the world recently. So anyways, here we have Hans playing in a match against Anish Giri. Currently, it's really popular to play hybrid formats, which basically just means you play classical chess and rapid chess, or like rapid and blitz, or blitz and bullet. Like, it's currently popular to play mix of time controls, and I personally really enjoy that. Like, this is the type of chess that I am willing to watch because it's not too slow. So, props to Hans for at least picking some decent time controls. This game specifically, not my favorite time control. It is 1 minute 30. 1 minute 30. This is 1 hour 30. And this is the classical chess time control. This is the time control that has been this is the time control I don't enjoy. But anyways, whatever. No one cares what I enjoy anyways. But Hans is playing with the black pieces against Anish Giri. As a lot of you guys know, Anish Giri is quite good at chess. Has been a very good player for a very long time. Hans, obviously, quite a bit younger, and is kind of up and rising. And he wasn't honestly considered even that much of a prodigy. That's the interesting part about Hans. He got good at chess in like recent years. Well, I mean, we all know that Hans cheated a little bit in his early years, but that's not the focus. Right now, the focus is that these are being played over the board, which means that it is quite unlikely that he is cheating. But once again, I am not able to provide proof that he is not cheating. So please don't come for me if it turns out in 10 years he actually is. And clip that Nemo said that Hans never cheated over the board. I'm just trying to give you the facts, my guys. I'm just trying to show you guys this one game. So, that is it. That is literally it. Let the chess speak for itself. As of this current moment, he is innocent over the board. But this is a very classic Catalan. This is actually exactly the line that I play. So this Catalan is exactly the Catalan that I play. The idea of playing bishop to b4 check and then moving it back is actually so that there is no b2, bishop b2, because it would make sense to put a bishop on a longer diagonal than this awkward square d2. So that's why black actually wastes one move to give a check so that the bishop is here on d2, and also the knights can't connect, not that it's that important, but etc. You understand, this move serves a purpose. So black wastes one move in the opening to actually make white have a slightly more awkward structure. So now you can see that white is actually playing bishop to c3 with the idea of potentially playing b3 if needed to, you know, put the bishop on a more reasonable square. So now that the bishop is on c3, Hans plays knight to e4. And the power of pair bishops in chess is very real, especially at higher elos, because usually once you get an open position, pair bishops are much stronger than knights. So because of that, Anish plays bishop to e1, once again forcing this bishop to move. Well, forcing is maybe the wrong word. Anish, of course, can give up the bishop, and the eval bar would be exactly where it is right now. But strategically, it might be a little bit harder for Anish to play, or he might not like those type of positions. I honestly don't know, and honestly, I don't really care. I'm just trying to tell you why they're making the moves they're making. Both ways of playing the game will probably be just fine. And honestly, if I saw an 1100 play bishop e1, I would be like, bro, you're bad at chess. But if I see Anish Giri play bishop to e1, I'll be like, wow, this is a grandmaster level move. That he is thinking 50 moves ahead. When he gets into this Catalan endgame, he has his pair bishops. But that aside, it's like, you know, the move does make sense, but you have to know why you're making that move, because otherwise bishop to e1 looks so passive. So, explaining to you guys why bishop to e1 is played. Now, after knight b to d2, remember how I said that the bishop b4 move makes it a little awkward for white to like move their pieces? White has spent 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get this horsey out onto d2. Which is why bishop to b4 check is one of my favorite lines in the Catalan. I actually think it's a very sweet move. So f5, b4, you might think this is a free pawn, and, you know, there's knight takes e4 after this, which is kind of a discovered attack because your bishop is unprotected. So if you actually take this bishop, this knight can simply go to g5, for example, and then if the bishop tries coming back to b4, you're now going to lose the exchange with knight takes e6, which is why that is not, in fact, a free pawn on b4. There is actually another line here, which I guess I can analyze, f takes e4, which kicks the knight as well. But after bishop takes b4, well, black once again has to kind of play c5, because if you play e takes f3, there is bishop takes f5. If you take on g2, the bishop can simply move, and once again, white is up in exchange. So both of these lines not looking too hot for black. The c5 line is fine. D takes c5, b takes c5. Now the bishop does have to move, or you can just take this pawn. Honestly, like, black is going to have to pick one of these minor pieces to capture anyway, so white has the time to take on d5, but white can also just play something like bishop to a5. If the queen takes, for example, there is now knight to g5, saving the knight and also threatening to take on e6. And this is just overall a very easy to play position for white, which is why, once again, b4 is not a free pawn. So, bishop f6, a4, queen to e7, knight to b3. I don't know if you guys are able to feel it, but hasn't it felt like white has struggled a little bit, at least, with getting their pieces kind of into places they want to go? I don't really know if this makes sense, but white has spent a lot of moves to get this knight onto the third. White has spent a lot of moves to keep this bishop on e1. Like, what I'm trying to say is white has had a little bit of development issues. And I'm not saying this is characteristic of every Catalan. I'm not saying that white should never play the Catalan or anything like that. I'm just saying this setup has felt a little awkward, a little cramped. But that being said, it's not like black has a significant advantage or anything like that. Black just has a pretty easy to play position. It's pretty intuitive to play. D takes c4 is fine, you know, c5 is fine. A lot of these positions you want to kind of break open in the center with the black pieces because you have the bishops now on good squares and stuff like that. And c5 honestly makes a lot of sense because this d pawn is kind of pinned with the rook on a1. But Hans decides to play d takes c4, which is also fine. Like I said, everything in this position is basically fine. And now he plays c5, taking advantage of this pin, because now after b takes c5, first of all, b takes c5 is totally fine. He can just take back. This is not, I don't even, this just doesn't work. The rook is still pinned. Like, you can't just take back. So, yeah, this is just like a comfortable position for black to play. You're about to break open the center again. Like I said, the pair of bishops, kind of nice. The bishop on e1, not so nice. And this is why bishop to b4 is a 5-head Catalan line, because white doesn't get b3, bishop b2 in. Bishop pair, kind of nice. However, Hans does not play b takes c5, which is also totally fine. Literally, like, there's basically no difference between bishop d5, because he just plays b takes c5 anyways. He just gets a tempo and puts his bishop on a better square than b7. Not saying that b7 is not a good square, but now the bishop on d5 is hitting both of these diagonals. And what do we like doing with our pieces? Giving them squares. They want open positions, they want diagonals, they want open, they just want a lot of squares to go to. So after rook 8 to b1, c4, now Hans has a sweet little pass pawn hanging out on c4. Once again, eval bar doesn't hate this position for white, but personally, as a human, I don't think that this is a very comfortable position to play for the white pieces. Like, I would be hard pressed looking at this position and thinking like, oh, this is going to be, you know, comfortable for me. Because black has some really clear positional advantages, such as the pair. Well, white also has the pair of bishops, but I would say that Hans' bishops are better. And also he's got this pass pawn now on c4. So after rook f to c8, knight to f1, knight to d6, rook to c1, the knight is simply coming over here, defending this pawn again, potentially attacking the a4 pawn. All of this looks pretty good. So now Anish makes, I would call this an inaccuracy. The engine obviously thinks that it is a blunder, but I think it is quite difficult to see immediately why a5, a move that doesn't lose any material, doesn't even lose a pawn, is so goddarn bad for white. And the reason that a5 is actually so goddarn bad for for white, the reason that a5 is so goddarn bad for white is because after bishop to e4, well, I'm also judging this game based on the fact that they're almost super grandmasters, whatever you want to argue. I don't know if you're arguing Anish Giri is a super grandmaster. Once again, he's a very, 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 very good player. I think having a 2-point swing in any direction at this level, I would consider probably a blunder. Like, I would consider a 2-point swing on the eval bar potentially a blunder. But I think a5 doesn't lose any material, but it does give white a very awkward position, because now after queen to a2, the bishop has moved. So now the knight can go to d5. Kind of sweet. So now Hans has the knights on d5 and d6. Look at how many squares these bad boys cover. Like, look at that. And then look at the bishop. And then look at this bishop. Like, this bishop has so much potential as well. And then look at white's pieces. Like, look at this horsey. Look at this bishop. Look at this bishop. This knight isn't that bad, but you get my point. Like, black is just, like, expanding. He's super expanding. He has a great position. He has a very solid, like, center coming through with this, and he's got a pass pawn, which is great. But that's why being able to use bishops is so important. So after c3, knight takes e4, knight takes e4. This pawn just keeps rolling, and then after rook to b8, there's all these threats with like rook to b2 and stuff. Really hard to defend against, but after queen c7, e3, rook now comes onto b2. And this is just like tough to play for white. Like, I've been saying this for a while that this bishop ain't so great on e1. And now you can really see why it ain't so great on e1. And obviously Hans is just very methodic with his moves. He even brings in the king to defend on e6, and not a single one of white's pieces is able to really move. And this is a classical game as well, so a win over Anish in a classical game is perhaps seen as more like powerful, I guess, than a game in rapid. But white is just super struggling to make moves. Here, actually, I think Anish makes another really bad mistake with e4. And actually, queen to d3 here, while the position is awkward, it's extremely awkward. You're very passive, but you're not lost. You know? Like, this move is really cool because you can't take on c2 because now there's queen takes and then there's this discovered attack. So this doesn't work, unfortunately. So white can't really get himself out of this pickle with the pawn. Like, there's a pass pawn on c2 in a middle game. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is still really awkward as a position, but you can try to hold on to this and you can try to put things in front of this pawn to defend. And maybe you can hold on to this pawn. It's tough. It's a really tough battle, but e4 outright loses the game because after f takes e4, queen takes e4, queen to b2. Now this rook is all of a sudden hanging because rook takes wins. And after playing rook takes b1, c takes b1 promotes into a queen. You would think that, oh, well, it just gets captured, but no, the bishop on d2 is actually hanging. So e4 really just kind of opened up the position for Anish to lose the game. So after bishop h3, rook to e7, bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes d5, queen e2, queen to f5, rook to e7. I mean, Hans is just up a piece. But it's not, like, actually the most easy to be won endgame because the king is kind of exposed and, you know, Anish has 2 pawns for compensation. So maybe Anish thought that there would be, you know, this would be his best practical chances. And I can respect that too. I don't really know. I'm not a super grandmaster. I can't play nearly as good as these guys, so I don't really know. But I do think that it's, like, this is a painful game, yeah? Like, you're kind of just there knowing that you're probably going to lose, being down a piece, and you're just gonna have to play your best. So obviously king takes h8 is not great because there's queen takes f7. That's not a free rook. It's a bait rook. So queen c6. I think Anish's best bet here is honestly almost not moving anything and just try to, like, defend stuff. Like rook b4, for example, stops bishop to d4 in order to, it's like, I think this is honestly Anish's maybe better shot because the king is kind of exposed. I think f4 is kind of just asking for it because now, you know, this can look really dangerous and there could be queen g8 and stuff, but queen f3, Hans is not scared at all after queen to g8, simply moves the king, identifies that there are no threats here, no additional checks for Anish. And after queen d5, simply gives this check. He actually has a better move here with rook to e2. But honestly, everything is pretty winning here. And also rook to h2 is a very hard move to find. So basically the idea of, like, if the queen, like, this is just checkmate, yeah? So you have to, like, do something about that. So for example, if you play rook to e8, this is checkmate in 4. But also they don't have that much time. And this queen is hanging. So there's just a lot of issues here. But queen to f2, very logical move. Also, it's helpful to give a few checks, maybe to gain some time. I do think that bishop f6 is maybe an inaccuracy because, once again, you're kind of, like, not giving a check. You're not threatening anything. You're just moving a bishop. You're protecting against queen g5, but it's not doing enough. And rook d6 here, once again, you can see that the evil player doesn't love this. Doesn't love Hans's continuation, but he is still winning nonetheless. And also, you do not want to trade queens in this position with the black pieces because your only advantage is being up a bishop. At least your promotion square is with a dark square bishop, but white still has 3 pawns, so this pawn's likely to get traded off, and if you can't ever take this pawn, then the game is a draw. So it's never worth it to trade off queens, basically. So they just like they don't have a lot of time here, so I can't really fault their moves that much. So I think this actually makes it a lot harder for Hans to finish off the game. Obviously, I do think it is winning, but I think this is just going to take a very, very, very long time, and it definitely does not compare to you know, like 14 moves ago, where he could have basically forced Anish to just resign the game because he's threatening checkmate or something. Yeah, like if he just moved his rook, I understand it can be really scary. I'm not saying I can play this better than them or anything like that, but Hans missed some opportunities there. They're going to this endgame. Like I said, this is actually not that easy to win, and we're already on move 79. This is move 79. And I think in this position, once again, I don't really know about the nuances of these type of endgames. I have never in my life studied 3 pawn plus rook versus rook, bishop, pawn. This is not an endgame that I have looked at, and is unlikely to be an endgame that I will ever look at. You can tell me that I will get this game in the next 10 years, like this position the next 10 years, and I will still not look at it because this is so niche, so specific. So honestly, that's one of the things that really separates top-level grandmasters, is their ability to handle endgames. And we see that all the time in the form of like Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri, for example. Like a lot of these players are really good at endgames. But yeah, anyways, so I'm not going to go super in depth about their like moves and their inaccuracies. I don't know exactly why this moment is a draw, whereas like in 2 moves, it's probably not going to be a draw. I really could not tell you. I don't have that kind of knowledge in endgames. We can go down these these engine lines if anybody cares, but we can just see where it's like going to be a potential win again for Hans. Like I said, this is a very tough position. Not a free pawn. Bishop is hanging. You do not want to give that up. Like, these are some... I think this is a wild move, I think. I understand they're low on time again, and I think Anish, if he hadn't played rook to e4, this game would be a draw. I think Anish overestimated the strength of Hans having a pass pawn. Anish in his head probably thought if he loses this pawn, he might lose this game. And as we can tell, the engine actually strongly disagrees with this. And I actually want to run this in the what's it called? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ah, this is too many pieces. I can't even run it in Syzygy. No, that's sad. That's so sad. Unlucky. Well, I just want to say I don't fully trust this to be a dead draw, according to Stockfish on depth 20. But I sure as hell am not going to use my brain to figure out whether or not it is. So I'm going to turn on the engine depth.
A few moments later.
I have Stockfish running now on depth 49, and it still says that it's a draw, so I am going to believe that it is a draw. I don't actually think it's that hard. So I'm going to actually figure this out live right now, and I'm going to explain my thought process to you guys on how I figure out if this is actually a dead draw or what the plan is. So basically, white has a very easy idea. You push pawn, you happy. Black also, coincidentally, has a fairly easy idea. If black promotes the pawn, they probably win the game, yeah? You know, chess is not that hard. Just promote your pawns, guys. So that being said, if the rook ever goes, like if the rook ever tries to be traded, this is a very clever sacrifice, because a rook is, okay, sorry, this doesn't work because this takes with a check, but what I was gonna say, the rook is a terrible defender against pass pawns, so the king actually has time to go to f4, and then when this pushes, now you can play g7 because you don't have rook f8 to defend against this, and you also don't have rook g6 to defend against this pawn promotion, which maybe is why after king takes a6, king to f3 is not the best move. Honestly, I don't even know where the best move to put the king is. All of these, the engine says is a draw. So, I don't know. Maybe for the sake of my variation, king to g3 then. I honestly do not know. But this is obviously a loss, because now you lose the bishop. So, here, in fact, black would actually have to do something to capture this pawn. So, let's say black tries to capture the pawn with the rook. So now, if rook to e8, rook takes a6, or rook to f6, you have to be really careful because this line is losing once again because you've got this. This is actually really tough to win with the white pieces. If the pawn is on b7, I actually believe that black is able... Okay, here, now I'm going to run a table base. I believe if the pawn is not on the rook file, it's actually a draw because you can get a pretty cool fortress. These are called fortresses in chess. Yeah, once again, like I said, the last time I analyzed anything like this was when I was probably like 9 years old. So it's been a very long time since I've ever seen this. Okay, so in this position, white is winning with black to move. This position is a draw. I was correct. See? I told you guys. I was right. So if the pawn is not on a rook file, you're able to create a fortress. Obviously, good luck drawing it. 100% agreed. But it is a table-based draw. I'm not exactly... Once again, I am not a grandmaster. I have never gone into this position before in my life. Honestly, if I ended up in this position with a queen versus rook, king, and a pawn, I'd probably just be like, okay, can we just like... Actually, I wouldn't. I would drag this game out for so long, and I would try to flag my opponent. The pawn on a corner is a loss because one of the top secrets to drawing this is that you just shuffle your rook between c6 and a6, have your king around. Like, you just do this basically the whole time. This is how you draw the game. Like, you just do this. The issue with doing that when the pawn is on a7 is that you can't. You're missing a file. So I don't know how you win this position as white. Honestly, I don't fucking care how you win this position as white. It ain't any of my business. I will never have this position in my life in a relevant game where, like, it's a classical game and I actually have enough time to figure out. I would just flag somebody in a bullet game, or I would lose this game with the white pieces. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. But this game is a loss for black, theoretically. That's the important part. But I'm really proud of myself for actually knowing that. Hell yeah. A little bit of that endgame knowledge actually stuck. So anyways, black has to be a little bit careful here, which means that you got to move your bishop. If you move the bishop, the king's going to come forward. Once again, if you come here, you're losing. If you play rook to c6, for example, try to push your pawn. King comes. If you ever push, f6 is happening. If you try to push, you're once again kind of like, this is kind of a gamba, because maybe this pawn can promote, maybe it can't, we don't know. But this is going to promote, obviously. You don't want that to happen. But if you go rook to c2, for example, and you promote, then there's rook to g2 all of a sudden. You can take this, and then maybe your pawn will promote, or you can take this. Anyways, super complicated stuff. I don't really want to go super in-depth about it, but this position is a draw. You're welcome. So Anish made a pretty big conceptual error. He definitely thought that potentially if he loses this pawn, he would lose the game. And I have just shown you guys that that is not the case. He has plenty of resources. I think one of the things he might have actually not seen potentially is rook takes f6 and knowing that he can promote the pawn. That actually might be one of the, it's very unlikely. I don't think it is. I don't think that's what he didn't see. I don't know what he did not see, but he didn't see something and he felt scared in this moment. And there was no reason for him to feel scared, but he also didn't have stockfish on his side. So it was also probably a really long game. Once again, I don't know. But yeah, this is really cool. Obviously, Hans plays the right move. And this is also really important. This is another thing that maybe Anish didn't calculate. He thought that at king d5, now he is all of a sudden winning again. Because now when the bishop moves, you simply block the bishop from being able to go to g7, and then g7, g8, and it promotes. Which is also kind of cool. So Hans plays a really good move, king c5, stopping it. But I also think this move is kind of forced. Maybe Anish thought that he wouldn't be able to make progress here, but obviously Hans proves him wrong. So for example, if you try to play king h6, trying to push this, there's simply king f8. If you go back, you can just go king g7. And this is like not really easy to win, but you can slowly maneuver. So this could still be a draw potentially, if black wasn't as dedicated, but it looks like black was dedicated enough. Yeah, the king comes around and then pushes the king out of Zug's one. So now the king has to move and then you win the pawn. So maybe this is what Anish didn't see. He thought he could hold this, but obviously with the bishop, you have infinite moves, right? Like you can constantly gain tempo in chess and push the opponent into Zugzwang. Like at some point, the king has to give up the pawn. So a really well-played game by Hans. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, but I think he played really well. And I think it was actually a really interesting game. I think we learned a lot. Let me know in the comments down below whether or not you think that Hans has a chance against Magnus in their upcoming match. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching, and let me know if you enjoyed this format. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to support the channel.